Boker Tov, Boker Tov, Boker Tov. Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome to the Aliyah Day. Glad you're with me. It is the 7th day of Hanukkah. Tonight is Zot Hanukkah, where we get to light all 8 of the candles of the Hanukkah and begin the 8th day of Hanukkah. We're going to have a gathering tonight for Zot Hanukkah, which will be a time for celebration, of course, and also a time for healing prayers. We're going to use this as an opportunity to pray for people. It's also Rosh Chodesh, the Rosh Chodesh of Tevet, today being the first day of Tevet. And of course, it's also, according to the secular world, the New Year's Day, the first day of 2025. So we've already had our New Year. The real New Year was 3 months ago during Rosh Hashanah, and we began 5785. This, however, begins the, as it were, the secular New Year. So, 2025, with respect to the fiscal year, is going to be a good year, and we have lots of things to look forward to. I think the rest of 5785 is going to be a blessing. Baruch HaShem. So here we are. It is on the, as I said, on the secular calendar, a new year. And unfortunately, there was apparently what appears to be a terror attack in New Orleans about 3 o'clock in the morning. I just found out, I guess there were people on Bourbon Street, intersection of Bourbon and Canal. They were there, reveling in the New Year festivities. And somebody took a SUV type vehicle, apparently, and mowed a bunch of people down, then had a shootout with police. The police officers killed the terrorist. But 10 people lost their lives, and about 30 people, it looks like, are injured. Hopefully no one else will suffer any loss of life or any other harm. They're saying that it's a terrorist attack, and maybe that's the case. This is just a reminder. We need to pray Hashem that he heal those who are injured and protect everyone else. But it's a reminder, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, to always be vigilant wherever you are. And there's don't fall for a leftist propaganda. Every time anytime there's a shooting, or God forbid a mass shooting, the first thing that you hear from the leftist propaganda media is to ban guns, right? We have a gun problem, we need to get rid of guns and ban certain guns and blah, blah, blah. What are we going to do now? Ban cars, ban SUVs. How about I have an idea. How about we outlaw murder or terrorism? That'll stop it. We have a human problem. That's the issue. It's a human problem. So it's not the gun. It's not the SUV. You can have 1,000 laws on the books. You can ban guns altogether, like they did. Guns are banned in Jamaica. It's nearly impossible for a law-abiding citizen to legally be able to carry a gun in Jamaica, and yet the murder rate there with guns is through the roof. Why? Because the only people who have them, aside from the police officers, are the criminals. So look, it's just don't believe the propaganda. And if you've fallen for that propaganda, just know that it's propaganda. But here's the bigger point. The bigger point is for everybody to stay vigilant wherever you are. And you need to carry, if you can legally, a gun or some other type of protective device with you all the time. And don't be naive. Don't think that just because you're going to the grocery store, or you're going to take the kids to the park, or you're going to go on a walk. And women, for God's sakes, don't go jogging or running or walking by yourself. You think, I'll be fine. No, you won't. Don't ever assume you're going to be fine. Okay. When you leave the grocery store, I'm just telling you right now, if you don't mind me saying, when you leave, especially ladies, when you leave the grocery store to walk into your car, with a grocery basket or whatever, look around. Don't be on the phone. Don't be on the phone. If you're talking on the phone, hey, can you hold on a second until I get to my car? Just pay attention, guys. That's all I'm trying to say. And probably being at Bourbon Street at 3:00 in the morning in a mass crowd is probably not the best idea. Got to think about that kind of stuff too. Don't put yourself in a situation in which, you're like in a big target area. Is everybody okay with that? It's just a little bit of a PSA. Just, be aware of your surroundings and, all that kind of stuff. I could go on and on about this. I have lots of experience and so forth with this kind of stuff. But just be aware, defend yourself. Don't ever assume that wherever you're going, you're safe, because you're not. You say, I'm going to Costco, I'm fine. No, you're not. I'm going to the synagogue, I'm good. Don't ever presume that. Well, if you come here, you're probably pretty safe, actually. Actually, this is probably the most safe place you can come. Now that I'm thinking about it. Okay, scratch what I just said there. Always be vigilant, though. Even when you get out of your car in the parking lot of the synagogue, be vigilant. But just know that somebody comes to the shul, they're going to have a problem. If they're a bad guy. But otherwise, when you're out and about, don't ever assume that wherever you're going is safe, because it's not. Okay, are we good? We good? All right. Well, may God bless the people there and help them. So today we're going to be talking about no greater love. In John chapter 15 and verse 13, Yeshua said, no greater love has anyone than this, that he lays down his life for a friend. And here we're going to be looking at this moment at which, yesterday we talked about the moment of revelation, where Joseph, who, is the type and shadow of the Messiah, that Joseph is revealed to his brothers. And by the way, wearing my Hanukkah sweater. I haven't had a chance to wear it this year, so I thought I'd wear it for the Aliyah. So here we are. And I can't see the whole thing. I don't think so, but it says spinner, spinner, kosher dinner is what it says in total. That's kind of cut off here on the program. But anyway, I digress. So we talked about the big revelation, but here this is also part of the third Aliyah, getting into the fourth Aliyah. He consoles his brothers, and he says something unique here, as we're going to bring down in Ma'am Loez, that gives us yet another parallel, yet another, what's the word I'm looking for? Type, right? Another pattern, if you will, okay? To this whole thing about what Joseph says and how he treats his brothers. And, of course, the example to us about how we should treat people. So let's say good morning, everybody. Thank you, Seth. And by the way, good morning. Says I look sharp. Thank you very much for appreciating the Hanukkah sweater, Baruch HaShem. Good morning, Leah. Good to see you. Hope you and Shmuel are doing great. Crystal, good morning. Wendely, Boker Tov to you. Ariella, Rafaela, good morning. Alida, good morning. Sarah Merritt, Boker Tov to you. Hope you and Shane are doing great. Ellie, good morning. Glad to see you this morning. Lori, good morning. Amana, Boker Tov. Gianna, Boker Tov to you. Hepzibah, good morning. Good to see you this morning. Hope you're doing great. Let's see. Did I say good morning, Donna? Donna Jones, good morning to you. Isaac, Boker Tov. Nellie Grace, Boker Tov to you. Shoshana Brenner, Boker Tov. Johan, good to see you. And let's see. Who else do we have? Good morning to Ahava and Samuel. Good morning. And Greg Kroon and Sarah Yochana. Good morning to you. Glenn, Boker Tov. Kara, Boker Tov. Thelma, Boker Tov. Literal Cat, Boker Tov to you. Micaiah, Boker Tov. Kimba Mintz, good to see you this morning. Grace, good morning. Hope you're doing great. Geneva, Boker Tov to you. Edith, Boker Tov. David White, good morning to you. Attila, Boker Tov. Joseph Johnson, good morning to you. Glad to see you this morning. Leah, car control. Yeah, we need more car control in America. They had barriers up. The barriers say don't drive here, but the terrorists still drove there. Anyway, don't believe the propaganda, folks. Laws, creating more laws or banning more things is not going to keep you safe. And always remember this, by the way. When seconds count, the police are minutes away. Now, nothing against law enforcement. I'm pro law enforcement. But the reality is, if you're depending upon the police to protect you, that's naivety. There were lots of police, by the way, in downtown New Orleans and the French Quarter last night. Lots of police. Just saying. I could talk about this topic for the entire Aliyah, actually, but my wife knows this is true, and she is saying to herself to move on. Good morning to yeah, Leah, God bless your grandfather. Ladies should always be aware. Never walk around with headphones in their head. Don't ever do that. Always look around, especially in parking lots. Anyway, good morning to, did I say good morning, Gianna? I lost my place a little bit. Good morning to Beverly, Hannah, Cantu, good morning. And Anthony, good morning to you. And Anthony Joseph, good morning. Anthony, is this your first time here? Your name does not look super familiar, but Boker Tov. Good morning, Rebbetzine. There she is. Love Nest, good morning. Digging the sweater. Thank you, Love Nest. Appreciate it. Carmelo, Moshe, good morning, sir. Moshe, Pelingana, where are you nowadays? Can you tell us? Unless it's a state secret. I wasn't sure what part of the world you are in presently. Good morning. Good to see you, my friend. Good morning to Clayton. Baruch HaShem. Rebbetzine, move on. Good morning, Levi. Good morning, Jody Payne. Truly grateful for HaShem guided me to Lapid Judaism. Thank you, Rabbi, for the meat. I'm starving for a diet from a diet of milk. Well, Baruch HaShem, Jody. I am glad you're here, and thank you for the compliments. And it is my great joy to bring these teachings on a daily basis. Baruch HaShem. Abu Dhabi. That's where Moshe is right now. Wow, Abu Dhabi. Okay, I'm not exactly sure where that is. But it sounds, I mean, it's obviously in the Middle East somewhere. But all right, well, welcome, Moshe. Hope you guys are doing great. Hope your fam is doing fantastic. Baruch HaShem. And the Borges, there's the Borges from Dallas, Georgia. Simone and Tony. Good to see you guys. Baruch HaShem. All right. So let's get to our teaching today. Kind of transition from security class. See, now that's the beautiful thing about Lapid Judaism. You come to Lapid, and you're coming here initially for Torah teaching, how to learn to live like Messiah, how to be Jews who follow Yeshua, how to get, as our sister just said here, so Jody, get some deep teaching. But you also get history lessons. Lapid Judaism also comes with lots of, for those of you who are veterans of this program, psychology lessons. You don't know this, but in addition to your yeshiva training to be good Jews, you're also learning to be good psychiatrists. And then, look, in addition to all of that, you get safety and security training. One of these days, the Rebbe team won't let me, but one of these days, we might actually get into hand-to-hand combat training. As we used to say in the old Marine Corps, back when I was in, which, by the way, is starting to kind of get that way. Talked to a young Marine the other day, and he was like, anyway. I told him what I had a specialty MOS. I told him what my MOS is like. That's not even around anymore. Thank you, son. Anyway, neither is sailing. But listen, back in the old Marine Corps, you used to call it line training. But y'all don't care, do you? French lessons. Thank you, Cara. Oh, you get French lessons too. How could I forget that? That's right, Cara. I forgot. Move on. Thank you, representing. Abu Dhabi is in the UAE, where Daniel grew up half of his life. Okay. Well, there you go. All right. Thank you so much. So Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. We talked yesterday about the shock and awe effect that had on the brothers. I want to turn now to Genesis chapter 45. and look at what Yosef said after the shock and awe, where the brothers are standing there and they can't believe what's going on, right? We spoke. If you missed the Aliyah yesterday, I want to encourage you to go back and listen to it, because there's so many good points there. And I'm not saying that because I said them. I'm just saying that because it's the reality of the sources. The brothers had convinced themselves, they had made this ironclad argument that Joseph is never going to be their king. These fanciful dreams are never going to come true. And yet, at the moment of truth, that in fact became the fact that Joseph was their king, that he was the one to whom they were going to bow down. And not only that, but he's also their salvation, their savior, their redeemer. And the types and shadows are obvious. It's interesting because, as I spoke yesterday, waxed eloquently, you can have all these reasons why Yeshua cannot be the Messiah, and you can nitpick this and nitpick that, and you can, Zakin Yagal is fond of saying that something he's noticed is that you say, well, this rabbi teaches this from this source. Well, it just depends on what source you want to use, right? But anyway, I digress. But you can make all these arguments, but the point is that you can't get away from the fact of the big elephant in the room, and that is that the one who's going to be the true Messiah is the one that all the brothers have universally rejected. You can't get away from that. And so, as I said yesterday, there are all these messianic figures, and you may not think, in Judaism, you may not think, well, I don't agree that person is really the Messiah. I think it's going to be this one over here. That may be true, but they have not been universally rejected. Only Yeshua. And this is the pattern we see from Yosef. But he says to his brothers, Ani Yosef, right? I am Joseph, right? Looking here at this verse, Ani Yosef ha'od avichai, right? Is my father alive? But his brothers could not answer him because they were left disconcerted before him. We covered this yesterday. Now we get into verse 4, where it says here, then Yosef said to his brothers, come close to me, if you please. And they came close, and he said, I am Yosef, your brother. It is me whom you sold into Egypt. And now be not distressed, nor reproach yourselves for having sold me here. For it was to be a provider that God sent me ahead of you, okay? For this has been 2 of the hunger years in the midst of the land, and there are yet 5 years in which there shall be neither plowing nor harvest. Thus God has sent me ahead of you to ensure your survival in the land and to sustain you for a momentous deliverance. And now it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me father to Pharaoh, master of his entire household, and ruler throughout the entire land of Egypt. Hurry now, go up to my father, and say to him, so said your son Joseph. Now, and he talks about, God has made me master of Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You will reside in the land of Goshen, and you will be near to me, you and your sons, your grandchildren, your flock, your cattle, and all that is yours. Now, this is going to be interesting when we get to the point about Goshen, because here Yosef just tells his brothers, you're going to reside in Goshen. Now, this is interesting because he had not yet had a conversation with Pharaoh. Okay, now remember that Joseph is the master of Egypt, but the land doesn't really belong to him. He can't just cede land to foreigners. Okay. So he doesn't have the prerogative to give away Egypt So he tells the brothers they're going to dwell in Goshen. Well, we're going to find out why he can say that without having to verify that with Pharaoh. That's a very interesting point. It's a very important point. We'll come back to that in a second. So what do we see here? We do see a pattern. It's obvious. Joseph is saying, look, you don't feel bad that you hated me and therefore betrayed me and therefore killed me or turned me over to be killed, because that's really what happened, right? The pattern is they wanted to kill him, but instead of them killing them and the blood being on their hands, they turned them over to Gentiles, sold into slavery, which is tantamount to turning him over to be killed. Okay, that was really in their heart. And the intention was that he would be a slave, and everybody knew that a slave's lifespan was extraordinarily short. And that's, of course, exactly what happened to Yeshua. The brothers hated him. They were jealous of him, and they wanted to kill him, but they couldn't kill him. Okay, which brings up another point, by the way. Let me just pause here and say this real quick. So the whole reason the gospel tells us that the Sanhedrin, I use air quotes around the term Sanhedrin because it really wasn't the full Sanhedrin. We talked about that yesterday. But the reason why the Sanhedrin turned Yeshua over to the Gentiles is because the Sanhedrin wanted to kill him, but they could not kill him because, according to Roman law, the only one who could issue a death sentence is a Roman governor, Roman court, what have you. And so they turned him over to the Romans so that the Romans would kill him. Okay. And that's what they wanted to have happen. All right. Now here's the caveat. We later read in the book of Acts, which I'm not going to get into the history of the book of Acts, but anyway, we read in the book of Acts that Paul was authorized by the Jewish court to go around killing Christians, right? That's what everybody has been told. Everybody believes. And the whole purpose of that is to make Paul into some kind of a hero, because he used to be somebody who murdered Christians, and now he's somebody who is a Christian, right? And the other part of that is B, to make the Jewish people look really, really, really mean. Okay. But you might be asking yourself, or maybe you've never asked yourself, is that really a historical fact? Is that really true? Did that really happen? Is it possible that that story is completely made up? Yeah. Because you didn't know one little important fact. Or maybe you never thought about it. So if the court had to turn Yeshua over to the Romans because they had no authority to kill anybody, then how do they suddenly have the authority to send Paul around killing people? If they couldn't kill Yeshua, then how is it that they stoned Stephen? You say, are you saying they didn't stone Stephen? No, I'm saying that maybe he died a different way. We don't know. Because the court doesn't have the authority to kill anybody. Could have been a mob slaying. That's possible. Could have been just a mob that just, lost their mind and killed him. That's a potential answer. But the point I'm trying to make is the court had no power to issue death warrants, which is why we turned Yeshua over to the Gentiles. And then suddenly we have a story about Paul, who's been given a bunch of death warrants by the Jewish court to go not only kill people in Israel, but here's the other part. They send him to a foreign country, like he's the equalizer or something. They go out to a foreign country. So if the Jewish court has no authority, no jurisdiction, as we say legally, in their own land, what makes us think they have jurisdiction in Damascus? So you say, well, golly gee, Moses, Rabbi, why would they make up such a fanciful story? It's propaganda to make the hero, Paul, look like a hero. Somebody who used to kill people and now he doesn't. It's a great story. I used to be a terrorist and now I'm not, I mean, think what you want, but those are the facts and you have to deal with the facts, right? Anyway, going back to our story here. Um, he's saying, look, you turned me over to be killed, but really you didn't. It was really God. So going back to our pattern, the Jewish people were inspired to do what they did to Yeshua. You say, that's crazy. Where do you get that kind of stuff? It's interesting. There's a story in the sources that says that when Judah walked by Tamar, who was dressed like a harlot, that he was going to walk right past her. He wasn't really going to, get involved with that. And then God sent an angel to stir up his motivation. Let's put it that way for our family programming here. So the angel came to Judah and kind of got him motivated. And his motivation drove him to go back and rethink the Tamar thing. And then he decided to go that direction, and and then didn't realize it was Tamar, of course. Point being is that God did that because he wanted that situation to unfold. Okay. So Joseph is saying the same thing here. He's saying, look, you sent me here, and of course he goes on to say, you sent me here so that I could be your redeemer, your savior. I could provide for you. Now, something else, another great insight about this is that later Jacob is going to pass away. And then Joseph is going to go with his brothers and the whole host of Egypt, in fact, and bury Jacob in Machpelah. That's a very interesting story. There's a whole lot I could share about that particular story, but I just want to share this one point. And that is the insights bring down that on the way, Joseph encounters the well that his brothers threw him into, which started this whole thing, right? And the story goes that here's Joseph. He's a king. He's riding in the royal chariot ahead of a throng of the host of Egypt, and surrounded with his brothers, with the coffin of his father right there, on their way to Machpelah. And they stop, and Joseph dismounts the chariot and goes over and kneels down next to the well and offers a prayer of thanksgiving for the well and for him having been thrown into it. It's a remarkable story. It's even telling it, I'm moved. But the point is that Joseph recognized that it was that moment of deepest despair, that moment of the most intense rejection, that moment of absolute hopelessness, of thinking that your life was over, that you're separated from your family. It's just you in the world all by yourself, and you're likely about to die. It was that moment that led to him riding in that royal chariot. How many of us have a well that hereunto we've looked at and despised? We looked at and wished it didn't exist. We looked at it and said, I don't know why that happened, and I wish it hadn't happened. But in actual fact, we need to kneel down at it and give God thanks. Why? Because if it wasn't for that well, we wouldn't be well. If it wasn't for that well, we would not have risen up. If it wasn't for the fall, we would not have stood up. If it wasn't for the decline, we would not have elevated. We need to kneel down and give God the glory for those moments in our life that we thought were utter tragedy and other failures, but were in fact part of the plan of success. If it hadn't have been for any of that, then we wouldn't be who we are today. And that's what happened to Joseph. And he gave thanks for that, for that very thing. Also, something else here. It says Joseph told his brothers to come close, and there are insights related to this. And one of the insights suggests that he brought his brothers close to him. Come close to me. And of course, reality or our logics could suggest one of the reasons to say come close to me is because I want you to, come close. I'm kind of wearing some Egyptian gear here. I want you to come close to me and recognize that I am, in fact, Joseph. But the other insights suggest that he said, come close to me and see that I'm circumcised. Okay. Now, there's another insight that suggests, well, that might not have been so convincing because the brothers already knew that the Egyptians were getting circumcised. They didn't really know why, right? So the Midrash presents another idea. It says the brothers would not believe him until he showed him the mark of a circumcision. That may or may not have been proof. Some suggest it might not have been modest for him to do it, although, that's maybe not. But there's another insight that I thought was interesting. It says, this might seem to be weak proof. This is what Mamloez writes. This might seem to be weak proof since, as we have seen earlier, Joseph forced all the Egyptians to submit to circumcision. But Mamloez goes on to say, in reality, however, this was in fact the greatest possible proof that Joseph was in fact Joseph's, since he worked to spread circumcision. Okay. So one of the proofs, so this is interesting, right? Because again, our mission as we're looking at this story is to look at the patterns that are being shown to us. And what this is saying in Mamloez is that one of the proofs that Joseph is in fact the true Joseph, the true Messiah, if you will, is that he's spreading circumcision. What is, and we're not talking here about circumcision, just the act of circumcision itself. We're talking here about conversion. In other words, Mamloez is bringing down something deeply prophetic, and that is that the true Messiah is the one who's going to be promoting conversion amongst the Gentiles. Now, you say, well, in modern Judaism, they don't teach that. I know, but see, we're post-Crusades, what we have in Judaism is what we have. Prior to the Crusades, Jews went around the world trying to bring Gentiles into the covenant. In fact, there's sources that are historical sources that say that rabbis would visit towns in the diaspora who had not seen a convert in a year. And the rabbis would rebuke the people of the village, the Jewish people, and say, why do you exist? This is really powerful because what they're saying is, the whole reason we're in the diaspora, the whole reason we are in exile is so that we can win Gentiles into the covenant. Therefore, if you've not brought any Gentiles into the covenant in a year, then you have no reason for existing. That was the mindset prior to the Crusades. You say, well, what changed after the Crusades? Well, what happened was the church started to kill Jews for proselytizing. Now, you got to ask yourself the question, why would you, if you're the church, why would you issue a decree telling Jews, if you proselytize and therefore convert anybody, we will kill you? Well, you would only do that for two reasons, or perhaps three. One, because they were doing it. Two, because they were doing it a lot. And three, because they were being successful at it. Otherwise, you listen, I can tell you from a position of leadership, you don't make rules unless there's a reason to make the rule. Okay. You don't even think about it. It's like, hey, you know what? This is a potential. No, you oftentimes you make rules and regulations based on experiences. Okay. You know what? We shouldn't have anybody do this because that's happened in the past and this is what happens. So let's make a rule. That's usually the way it works. 99% of the time, I can guarantee you. This is true in this world. It's true in the secular world in which I've been a leader in the secular world and other organizations as well. Same thing. So if you're in the church, you're not going to make a rule that, hey, if you Jews proselytize anybody, we will kill you, burn you at the stake, bury you alive. Yes, I'm not kidding. That's exactly what they did. You would only do that if the Jews were actually doing that. Otherwise, it would be kind of silly. Hey, if you proselytize anybody, I'll kill you. We're not proselytizing anybody. We didn't even believe in proselytization. We think that you don't have to be in the covenant if you're a Gentile. They wouldn't do that if you weren't doing that. Okay. So this tells us that getting Gentiles saved by bringing them into the covenant, which is exactly what that means, used to be a thing until the church decided to make it, we'll kill you. And so then what happened was, so here's how the psychology comes into play. According to the Bible, we are supposed to be a light to the nations, which has always been interpreted to mean getting them saved by bringing them into the covenant and making them Jews. But if suddenly that becomes a problem that you can't do it because you'll be killed, but yet you have a problem. I'm supposed to convert Gentiles, but if I do, I'll be killed. So what do I do? So then we come up with a Noahide fantasy, because in that way we're at least fulfilling our obligation, but yet we're not doing something that will get us killed. That's how the mindset developed. Okay. And that's unfortunately the reality of psychology. So going back here, he says, look, I was sent here, and he proves his circumcision. Here's something else he says. This is very interesting. He says, he therefore told them to come close, and then said, I am Joseph, your brother. If you separated from me because of the ban, he goes on to talk about the oath that they made and so forth. And then he says, I'm telling you this in case that was the reason you separated from me. But actually, this ban that you made, this oath that you took, does not require formal annulment. Listen to this. This is where I really want to go to. I could talk. There's a whole lot about the ban and the oath they made, but I want to kind of skip that part. This is what I really want to share. It says, the only reason you sold me to Egypt was to fulfill the promise that God made to Abraham at the covenant between the parts in chapter 15 and verse 13 of Genesis. Now, okay. So what happened there was that God told Abraham that his people were going to be enslaved in a foreign land for 400 years. Now, here's the interesting part. When you do the math about the enslavement in Egypt, it was not 400 years. It was 200 and something. I forget the exact number, but it was roughly half the time. For the sake of discussion, let's use that. So the question has always been, what happened? Because God promised one thing, but it ended up being something else. Now, it is true that a negative promise or a negative decree can be annulled through teshuvah. That's one potential. The other potential is that they say, well, the exile actually began with Isaac. Okay. Thank you, Shoshana. 210. Baruch HaShem. That's another example. But but that's those two possibilities. But here's the third thing. This comes from Mam Loez. Listen carefully to what Joseph says to his brothers. He says, so he talks about this covenant between the parts, and he's referencing the fact that we're going to be in exile. You're going to be enslaved. Okay. Now, keep in mind, how did this all begin? Keep in mind, how did this all begin? Oh, this is so good. This is so good, Charlie, right? I know. They're all going to become slaves. But this began by the brother they rejected becoming a slave first. Okay? Right? So this is what he says. He says, now the decree, what decree? The decree to become slaves, to go into exile. Now the decree is beginning to be fulfilled through me. The ban is automatically annulled and does not need formal annulment because of this fact. So what Joseph is trying to tell them is God issued a decree that we should be enslaved for 400 years, and he chose me to be your agent to fulfill that so that you don't have to. This is why it was only 210 years and not 400 years, because God took out that decree on one man, Joseph. He took the brunt of the slavery. That's the pattern being shown us, right? I became a slave basically so that you don't have to. And in fact, you could even argue that had the brothers not made a colossal mistake, which we'll find out about later in the book of Shemot, that Joseph might have taken on the entire 400 years. What do you mean, Rabbi? Well, the only reason they came to Egypt was because of famine. Now, once the famine ended and they took Jacob back, Jacob passed away and they took him back. They went back to Egypt and remained where they were. Well, and you could make the argument, his life is pretty good. Their brother is king of Egypt. So Joseph could not cease being king of Egypt. That was his mission in life. And so therefore, while Joseph was alive, they remained in Egypt because, Joseph is there. And, you could make the argument that, well, as long as our brother has to stay, we'll stay. Okay, that'd be fair. But what happens when Joseph dies? When Joseph dies, there's no reason to stay in Egypt. They could have, and in fact, should have gone back to Canaan. And if you read the scriptures, there's no reason why they couldn't. There's no reason why they shouldn't. There was no precedent to stay in Egypt. In fact, the sources bring down that what happened was they just kind of got cozy with the culture. They started, buying land, opening businesses, basically becoming Egyptians. And as a result, the slavery, because we didn't go to Egypt as slaves. And basically what happened was we became slaves by us diving into that culture. So you could make the argument that had that not happened, had they gone back to Canaan after Joseph had died, then Joseph would have taken the entire slavery on his own self. You could make that argument. There's another interesting insight here that is said in Mam Loez. It says we have a tradition that God forgives three people for their sins. He who becomes a proselyte, a convert, one who marries. So on the day of your conversion, all your sins are wiped away. On the day of your marriage, all your sins are wiped away. And it says finally, one who gains a high position. So if you have gone from a low position to a high position, then that means that's because you have been forgiven of your sins. Now, let's go to Rabbi Monk here. It says here, for it was to be a provider that God sent me ahead of you. And this goes back to the idea of what we call bitikon. Okay. Good morning, Sergio and Roni. Good morning to you guys. I hope you guys are well. There's a difference between emunah and bitikon. Emunah and bitikon. So, emunah is faith. Bitikon is trust. There's a difference between the two, however. So, emunah, faith, is a belief. Trust is an action. The simplest example is your father, you're a little boy or a little girl for that matter, and your father is standing in the deep end of the pool, right? And he says, jump and I'll catch you. Now, emunah says, I know my father is capable of catching me. I have faith, in fact, that he would catch me, right? Bitikon is actually jumping. And how many of you, now I know most of us, maybe not everybody, but most people have probably been in that situation. You were a little boy or you're a little girl and and you're kind of, it's intimidating. And your dad says, jump, I'll catch you. And, you kind of, you're like, should I jump? Should I not jump? That kind of stuff, right? That's bitikon. And so Bitcoin suggests a lot of people have faith, few people have Bitcoin. Okay. Bitcoin is where we say, God, you're the master of causes. I have faith, but I'm going to step out. And we also understand that if things aren't going so well, there's still a reason. We have to have faith that God wanted us to do this. That's why we're doing it, even though it doesn't seem like it's going so great, right? Something reason. God is the master of causes. So here's what it says. In order to persuade his brothers that he no longer judged them harshly for their past fault, Joseph explains to them with great insistence that he considers the chain of events and his own extraordinary destiny as part of a plan prearranged by God. The purpose of this plan was to save the tribe of Jacob from a famine which would have destroyed it. So the point here is God did this so I could be your savior. He said, rarely indeed does a historical account make so apparently clear the ways of divine providence. That's so great. That's why this story is so amazing. The story of Joseph from the start to finish. Because listen to this last sentence that Rabbi Monk says, and you've got to get this because you might get out there and you hear all these arguments for and against Yeshua. And you know what? You're like, oh man, I'm not sure what to believe. Believe the pattern. Ask yourself, who is the brother universally rejected who will become the Messiah? And I don't care what your little fancy arguments for or against are, it has to be Yeshua. There's no other choice. Who else would it be? Who else? Listen to what it says. Rarely indeed does a historical account make so apparently clear the ways of divine providence. God is screaming at us. Look at the pattern. Look at the pattern. So another final thing to say here about the Goshen part. Okay. We'll conclude with this for today. It says, you will reside in the land of Goshen. Remember, I just said, good morning, Prison. Glad to see you. Looks like you're new, so I'm glad you're here. I've been watching videos for a few months now. Oh, Baruch HaShem. Welcome. So remember how I said Joseph kind of like gives away Goshen. Now, how can he do that without talking to Pharaoh first? Okay. Well, here's an insight. It says here, Joseph knew that his father would not consent to residing in Egypt's capital, a center of pagan idolatry. That's from Ramban. Without hesitation, he was able to assign him his province situated in Lower Egypt, for he knew that his choice would be ratified by Pharaoh. Why? This was so since Pharaoh's predecessors had deeded Goshen to Sarah as a gift when she had been abducted and therefore restored to Abraham. This is from Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, chapter 26. So remember that episode where Pharaoh abducted Sarah and then, he gave her back and he blessed Abraham with a bunch of wealth? Well, one of the things he did was he said, I'm going to deed to Sarah forever the land of Goshen. So Goshen has always belonged to the Jews. And by the way, still does. So it says here, hence, this region was rightfully returned to Sarah's descendants, and Pharaoh, eager to keep Joseph in his service and fearing his possible return with his family to Canaan, hastened to affirm the rights to this district. It indeed remained under Semitic influence, and it is apparent from the names of the cities that were put there that included such places like Succoth, Etham, Piharoth, Migdol, and Baal-Zephon, which are all Semitic names. There's something else, by the way, that I want to add to that as we conclude here. The name Goshen has the exact same gematria as the word Moshiach in Hebrew. Therefore, when the Jews came to Egypt, they were dwelling in the Messiah who Joseph represents. End of our Aliyah today. Thank you so much for being a part of this program. We're going to come back tomorrow and continue talking about Vayigash. We'll see you tonight for the Zot Hanukkah gathering. If you're local, please join us. If you're not local, then tune in. And if you have a prayer request, something you'd like for us to pray about healing wise, then you can send that in to email it or whatever to Kentura if you'd like for us to address that. God bless you. Thank you so much for being part of this program. Please be sure and donate to our digital sign campaign. Stay safe out there. Always be aware of your surroundings. Think about it. I know, especially for you ladies, it's not natural for a lady to think about this kind of stuff. And I totally get it. But you have to, ladies. Don't be naive, okay? God bless you. Thank you so much for being here. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow, or tonight, I should say. And Hanukkah Sameach, and happy Rosh Chodesh, and God bless everyone.